Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar, which is the second in our series of China Digital Consumer 2020 webinars, the subject of which is e-commerce strategies for brands of all sizes. And of course, China's e-commerce market has seen exponential growth in the last few years. We see Singles Day last year reached over 30 billion US dollars, achieving 27% year-on-year growth. And of course, the China consumer market growing very strongly, and a lot of opportunities there for brands of all sizes, from multinational, well-known consumer brands through to SMEs. So that'll be the subject of today's webinar. Just before I hand over to our speaker, I'd like to, just bear with me one second. Sorry, I'd just like to do some housekeeping with you. So you will see that there'll be a panel in front of you, which you can use to ask questions. So you'll see that there is a question box just here. At any point in the webinar, you can ask a question of the speaker. We will have a Q&A session at the end. But if there's something that pops up during the conversation that we could do with Sam answering, then we will pass that question on to him. Also, I just want to check that everyone can hear me okay. Sometimes the technology doesn't always work first time. You'll see that there is a raise your hand button just here. So if I could just ask everyone just to click that, just so that I can see that people can hear me. Okay, perfectly. I can see lots of hands going up there, which is brilliant. It's always nice to know that there's people out there listening. So that's fantastic. Okay. So just for those of you that aren't familiar with CBBC, we're obviously the main trade organisation helping UK companies to do business in China. We have 13 offices in mainland China. We work with companies in all sectors, including retail, food and drink, healthcare, finance, and so on. And we run events. So we run a wide program of activities for our members to help them with understanding the China market, the opportunities and the challenges of doing business there. So we have more webinars coming. You'll see that the next session after this is the 17th of February. We'll have a session on popularizing your brand through WeChat mini programs, which sort of follows on from today's session and will be relevant for many of you. We then have a session on the 3rd of March on cultural intelligence. And then again, we have another session focused on the universities sector on the 17th of March. So without further ado, I will hand across to our speaker. Just a quick introduction to Sam Deacon, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at Samarkand Global. Sam heads up the commercial team at Samarkand, so he's very much on the side of managing relationships with brand partners and helping them to access those e-commerce opportunities in China. And Samarkand Global are an e-commerce business that really specializes in helping Western brands and retailers to enter the Chinese cross-border e-commerce marketplace. So with that, I will pass control across to Sam, and very much look forward to hearing what he's got to say about the opportunities in China. Sam. Oh, bear with me. Let me just change the slides. Okay, there we go.
Hopefully you can see my screen now, everyone. Let me just minimize this. Okay, perfect. So thank you for that introduction, Mark, and everyone, good morning. Thank you for joining us. And we'll be discussing Chinese e-commerce strategies for brands of all sizes. In terms of what we'll cover today, first of all, I'm going to give a brief introduction to who exactly Samarkand are, and why a UK company can talk with authority about Chinese e-commerce. And then we'll deal with why we're actually talking about Chinese e-commerce, and why, if you are a brand that's looking to enter or has already entered China, e-commerce really needs to be at the top of your strategy. And then for the main body of the presentation, what I've done is I've focused on some e-commerce strategies that I've segmented according to business size. So looking at some of the key questions that I get a lot from the brands that we work with and prospective brands. They're by no means are the kind of strategies exclusive to brands of those sizes. Those are just a kind of rough guide. So even if you are a large brand with global sales revenue of over 20 million pounds, you will still have hopefully useful nuggets of information in the other sections. That's just how we've segmented the presentation. And as Mark said, there is an opportunity for Q&A at the end. So please feel free to submit some questions, and I'll help answer them. So first of all, who are Samarkand? And I think a good place to start is who am I? So as Mark said, I lead the commercial team and work closely with our brand partners in Europe, and really myself and my team are the bridge between Samarkand's team on the ground in China. So in Shanghai, we have our sales, our marketing, customer service, store operations team, and our role in Europe is to work very closely to understand the brand and also to understand China, and help both the China team and the brand understand each other. So we're that bridge. Samarkand is an e-commerce services company. We're entirely focused on China, and our vision is that one day Chinese e-commerce will be as easy as selling on your own.com. It's certainly not there yet, but we are building the software platform and the technology and the tools to move towards that vision. So we were founded in 2016 by some British entrepreneurs who have a history of technology companies. So they've done digital marketing, mobile gaming, cloud computing, and in 2016 they were looking for a new challenge, spent some time in China, and understood that there was a gap in the market in terms of representing European brands in China. South Korean, Japanese, and even Australian brands have been really active in that market for a number of years, but actually apart from some big name luxury brands, European brands on the whole are underrepresented. So we have 3 offices. I mentioned the one in Shanghai. We've also got a small office in Hong Kong, but we're headquartered here in London. We've got a 20,000 square foot distribution centre and office in South Wimbledon, just on the Northern Line. So if anyone wants to visit, please email me, and we're always glad to show people around. We've got 60 full-time staff. They are roughly split as a third UK, as in a third British, a third from the rest of the world, and a third Chinese national. And those are the stats across all our offices. Everything that we do is run off our own proprietary technology platform that we've built, and that will be a running theme throughout today's presentation. But we are kind of a tech-first business, and at the moment we are running 12 e-commerce storefronts in China, a mixture of branded stores for brands that we work with, and also multi-brand retail stores as well. And in terms of sales volume, or in terms of logistics volume, we're sending around 15,000 parcels to China every month direct to consumers from our warehouse in South Wimbledon. In terms of the services we provide, we do a whole range of things, but kind of the simplest way to describe it is that we do e-commerce distribution. So we buy and sell products from our brand partners, and we sell them to our e-commerce customers. So whether that's big platforms like Kaola or JD or Alibaba, or smaller, more niche channels, and we act as an e-commerce distributor. We also run direct to consumer stores on behalf of brands. So that's where we set up a branded storefront on a platform like Tmall, or maybe it's a WeChat mini program or a China hosted website. We run that on behalf of the brand with a mixture of fees and a sales commission. A big part of what we do is our logistics network. So we work very closely with a number of Chinese specialist logistics firms, and we are sending individual parcels to end consumers in China all the time, but we're also doing palletized air freight trade as well. We have the ability to do both of those things. And our technology platform provides much greater insight into like your sales in China. So really, we aim to connect brands with the opportunity of Chinese e-commerce just through a single partnership. And a great example of this kind of holistic approach that we have is on the right here, which is an image, a pretty low quality photo, sorry, that's taken on my mobile phone. But the lady in blue in the center is someone we work very closely with. She's a kind of key opinion leader, or KOL. She runs her own media channel in China, driving traffic to an e-commerce store. Her name is Yu Zhaoge. We work very closely with her, and in December we brought her over to London and took her around 5 of our brand partners. We did live streams. This one's from the 111 Skins Harley Street clinic. So we broadcast to around 500,000 Chinese partners. So that's the kind of opportunity that we're bringing to our brand partners. So we're doing a whole suite of things. In terms of the brand partners that we work with, we try and focus on kind of interesting or unique brands with a really good brand story. That's really where the demand is for foreign brands in China, either heritage brands or something that can offer something truly unique to the consumer. So we are split. It's a lot of skincare and beauty brands, but also some supplement brands as well. And I think 111 Skin and Zeta West are really good examples of. So 111 Skin is a premium skincare brand, which is doctor-led. So it's based around skincare to help you recover from cosmetic surgery. Zeta West is a supplement business, but it's all based around an IVF clinic. Zeta West ran that IVF clinic for a while. So these are examples of brands with a unique brand story that are very different to kind of Chinese brands. And that's a great example of the kind of brands that we like to work with. So if you are a brand with a very unique story, or especially a founder-led brand, then please get in touch. But as you can see, it's quite a wide range of brand partners. We're not necessarily focused on a particular category. We always say to our brand partners that they will remain the experts in their brand. What we know about is e-commerce in China, and also the logistics and technology side of things. So a lot of how I spend my time is working closely with brands, marketing departments, or their new product development departments to help them understand China and how we can translate that brand into something for Chinese consumers. So that was a very brief introduction to Samarkand, but why are we talking about e-commerce? And really, the shortest answer is that the Chinese e-commerce market is absolutely huge. So to put that into context, the Chinese e-commerce market is bigger than the next 10 largest e-commerce markets combined. So it is a uniquely sized opportunity. Part of that is definitely due to the size of the population, but it's also to do with the role that e-commerce plays within the retail mix in China. So China leads the way in terms of e-commerce as a percentage of retail sales. So in 2019, it was around 37% of retail sales, miles ahead of the UK, which is considered to be a very advanced e-commerce economy. And the forecast is actually, so for 2020, it's forecast to be around 44%, and then in 2023, around 64% of retail sales will be going through e-commerce. So really, e-commerce is becoming the dominant channel in China in comparison to physical retail over the next few years. There's lots of factors that have driven that. But I think central to it has been this very, very quick evolution over a period of, say, 30 years, where China has gone from a retail environment that was dominated by state-owned enterprises with limited access to brands. And in 30 years, it's evolved very quickly to an economy with 800 million smartphone users and widespread access to the internet. And what this has led to is some of the most innovative retail companies in the world, especially the most innovative e-commerce companies. And innovation is really central to e-commerce in China. So some of the kind of world-leading innovations that have come out of China over the last few years are in the logistics network. So if anyone has spent time in China, you'll know that the streets are filled with couriers zipping around on either mopeds or bikes, and that's part of a logistic network that means that this statistic here of 90% of orders are delivered within 24 hours. That's from JD, one of the largest e-commerce platforms. Their average delivery time across the whole of China is 16 hours. And really, if you're living in a large urban conurbation, then you're talking about having a product delivered within 2 hours. So there's also been great innovation in terms of digital media as well. So China has led the way in innovative platforms like short video. So TikTok, which is starting to become an important part of brand strategy in the US and UK. That is a Chinese-owned company, and it's all built around a Chinese e-commerce, a Chinese social media platform called Douyin. That has seen a huge growth in driving consumption, and now the area of real growth is in live streaming. So this is something that we don't really have in the UK yet. I guess I would describe it as almost like a TV shopping channel, but a lot more going on your mobile phone. Lots of things jumping around, lots more interactive things that you can do. And this is a place where people can showcase brands and products. And in 2018, for Taobao, which is an Alibaba-owned platform, it generated over $15 billion of sales. So that is people watching people like this man here who's trying on lipstick and purchasing the product directly from those streams. So that kind of innovation has helped drive consumption. And the third kind of area of innovation has been around payment methods. So China is now a largely cashless society, and the dominant payment methods really are mobile wallets. So Alipay and WeChat Pay are the two leading ones. And this has had a revolutionary effect on physical retail, but it's also had a revolutionary effect on online payments as well. So for instance, in the WeChat ecosystem, it's very possible to discover a brand through a WeChat article and then click on that product and be directed to a store and make a purchase there and then, whereas in the West, you would have to go to a standalone e-commerce site, perhaps, and put in your credit card details, and put in your address, maybe sign up for an account. So those payment methods have helped advance e-commerce as well. One thing that is very unique to Chinese e-commerce platforms are the kind of innovative and entertaining experiences they've created for consumers. So this is a platform called Pinduoduo, which is a really interesting platform. They didn't exist until 2015, so they've only been around a little over 4 years. They're now the second largest platform in China with around 400 million monthly active users. And a big part of their growth has been focusing on entertainment. So on this left-hand screen, this first screen, you can see this tree feature, which is on the home page. And what it does is it's a game quite similar to, I'm not sure if anyone remembers Farmville on Facebook, where you would log in and you would look after a farm. This is designed to get people coming back to the platform every day. And the user would pick, in this example, it's pick a tree to look after. So this is a mango tree. And the customer is rewarded by visiting that tree every single day and looking after it. And they're rewarded with coupons, money off vouchers. And then eventually, when the tree has reached fruit, the user is sent a physical box of real mangoes to enjoy compliments of Pinduoduo. And this game led to like 11 million daily active users. So people logging into the e-commerce platform and taking these actions every day, and it led to 9 tons of mangoes being given away. And this kind of gamification and putting fun at the center of it is key to Chinese e-commerce. There is now a version of this game which is not based around fruit trees, but it's based around dairy cows. So again, you log on every day and you feed and look after your cow, and then eventually they will send you free bottles of milk. And something that I discovered through our China managing director playing and getting milk for his children through that way. So all of this innovation and this entertainment has led to e-commerce in China becoming a national pastime. So if you look at the statistics of e-commerce purchases in China, 68% of consumers make purchases on either a daily or a weekly basis. And if you compare that to the rest of the world, it's only 33%. So the Chinese consumer is logging onto these platforms much more frequently and making a lot more purchases than we are in a Western market like the UK. And this kind of focus on entertainment and innovation has led to a consumer experience that is really different. So on the left here, you have the home screen from my Amazon application. And I think this is a really typical example of a Western e-commerce platform. It's very clean in its design. It's very simple. The focus on the homepage is just on 3 products. So 2 that Amazon is pushing to me, and the middle one is related to a search for an electric toothbrush that I bought recently. But if you contrast that to the right-hand side, this is the home screen from Taobao, which when you open it, it's kind of like it animates and things fly around, things pop up, coupons. It's a much more interactive experience. And it's really important for brands who are thinking about e-commerce in China to understand how their brand will be consumed and how the users in China will experience and their mentality when they're going on these e-commerce platforms. They're going on there to, yes, make purchases, but they're also going on there to have fun. The primary reason that people use e-commerce in the UK is for price comparison, whereas in China it's much more about fun. So hopefully from that you would have seen that China is the largest and most innovative e-commerce market in the world. But I guess the question is then, why aren't all brands trying to enter the China market? And the answer really is that it's also the most complicated. So this is a survey of over 1,000 brands that are active in the China market, and it's a survey, a qualitative survey asking about how it's going for them. So a large chunk of them find it incredibly complex with confusing regulations. 45% of brands are unsatisfied with the sales, and a lot of that comes from not being able to understand who the users are or the end consumers are, but also who your wholesale clients might be as well. And also, it's a very expensive market to enter a lot of the time. So 21% of brands feel that the investment for sales is far too high. One of the complexities that I think is worth dwelling on for a little while is general import versus cross-border e-commerce. It's kind of an intricacy to the Chinese market that we don't necessarily have anywhere else. So there are effectively 2 e-commerce markets in China. The first is general import, or sometimes that's called domestic. This is where selling on an e-commerce platform is under exactly the same rules as it would be to sell on a physical shelf in a physical store. So that means you have to go through, from a brand's perspective, it means you have to go through a process of product registration. So that means translated labels, it means prohibited ingredients, potentially reformulations, and crucially, it means more often than not means animal testing. So for any cosmetic or beauty product, you will be required to test on animals to enter the China market. So this is a huge red line for a lot of European brands. In terms of size and scale, general import is the kind of, it's around 90% of the e-commerce market. So the vast majority of e-commerce is general import. But actually, in some categories such as beauty and skincare, that's not. It's a less of a share of the market. It's dominated by a small number of platforms. So Alibaba, JD, and Pinduoduo, they represent probably well over 70 to 80% of the market. So if you're going to enter the market through domestic or general import e-commerce, you really have to be thinking about those platforms. From a consumer's perspective, the Chinese consumer is very aware that they might be purchasing China-specific formulations. So active ingredients might be involved, or their strength might have been reduced. They benefit from much quicker logistics. So as I said, in the major conurbations, we're talking about delivery in 2 hours, really. And they also have unrestricted buying power. In contrast, cross-border e-commerce, which you sometimes see as CBEC, that's where the Chinese consumer is purchasing a product exactly as it is consumed in the home market. So exactly as it is in the UK. There's no need for reformulation. There's no need for translation of labels or stickering or anything like that. And there's no need for product registration, which means there's no need for animal testing. So this is quite often the preferred route for many brands, and this cross-border e-commerce is the focus of Samarkand. When it comes to, there's no need to register your trademark if you want to sell cross-border e-commerce, but we would always recommend that the first thing you do before thinking about entering the China market is registering your trademark. China's a first-to-file system. So if you're going to be building any kind of brand awareness or brand equity in the market, you need to protect yourself from moment one. In terms of percentage share, cross-border is around 10% of the e-commerce market, but it's actually growing a lot quicker than domestic or general import e-commerce. So expect to see that to go up to kind of 15%, 20% over the next couple of years. It's also a much more fragmented market. So even within e-commerce platforms alone, the market leader is a platform called Kaola, which up until recently was independent, but it's now been bought by Alibaba. But then you have big players such as VIP, also Little Red Book. There's a wide variety of cross-border e-commerce platforms. And you also have growth in things like social commerce. For the consumer perspective, the main drivers for purchasing cross-border are the perception that the products are higher quality and more reliable. They also benefit from a lower tax rate. So the Chinese government is trying to encourage and grow cross-border e-commerce, and one of the ways in which they're doing that is lower kind of VAT. So for most products, it's 9.1%, but there are, for premium products, if they have a certain value, the tax rate goes up to 23.06%. But that's that's something that we work with our brand partners on identifying what's going to hit that higher tax rate. And something that's very important as well is to note that there are you're limited in terms of the transaction volume you can do as a Chinese consumer on cross-border e-commerce. So you're limited to 5,000 RMB per transaction. So it's roughly it's just over £500. And then across the year, your total cross-border e-commerce spend is limited to 26,000 RMB. We can see from our data analytics platform that there are routes around these limits that Chinese consumers take. So for instance, a couple of weeks ago, we had a 91-year-old woman purchase some anti-aging skincare products. Now, either she is a very optimistic person, or she has had she's lent her identity card to someone she knows to use. All purchases for cross-border e-commerce are linked to an identity card, which presents an interesting data point. So moving on to the strategies. As I said at the start of the presentation, I've broken them down into kind of three areas, or three business sizes really. So that first business size, which I call the emerging independent, is really for like maybe as a startup brand or like a small brand which has got up to 2 million sales globally, but it's mainly focused in the UK, and they've got ambitions to grow internationally, but might not have the budget to invest in China. So common question we see there is like, how can I access Chinese demand with very little budget? So we'll answer that shortly. That middle range brand is really a brand that's started to grow and start to think about international expansion. So maybe they've expanded into markets like the US and Australia and the EU, which through their proximity and the nature of the market are quite possible to expand into, but they're trying to think about how they can have a footprint in China. It's about choosing the right channel there. And then also a type of brand that we talk to a lot is a kind of maturing China brand who's maybe been active in the market for around 2 years. They might have significant sales in the market, but what they want to do is they want to gain a better understanding of those sales, and they want to kind of take control of those sales. So we'll using these scenarios, we'll answer some or come up with some strategies for those brands. And the way that we'll approach it is we'll look at the opportunity for those brands, the complexity of that, some kind of solutions that are out in the marketplace, and then also I will be focusing on some Samarkand solutions and how we solve the problems as well.
Mark, just a quick question I had from Jane. She's just asking about whether there's particular categories, so kind of what the kind of real categories that appeal to Chinese consumers would be that you find.
So in terms of cross-border, the biggest cross-border products or product categories tend to be beauty and cosmetics, as well as mother and baby, and some food and beverage. What I will say is that the Chinese consumer is very astute, and if you have, and they're also very well researched and beginning to be very well traveled, if you have a really unique or interesting brand, irrespective of the category, there will be some demand for that in China. If you're doing something different and would be available from a domestic brand like in China, so for instance, potentially if you're making snack food, China might not be the market for you because there's likely to be an equivalent domestic product that's going to be available much cheaper. But if you're doing something kind of unique, or you have a brand of particular heritage or a good strong brand story, then irrespective of the category, there will be some level of demand for your brand in China.
Great. Okay. Yeah, devil's always in the detail, I guess, on that.
Thanks, Mark. I guess actually before we dive into the strategies, this could be a good time to deal with any other questions. Is there anything else you wanted to? Are there any other questions that come through, Mark?
Yeah, there's a question I had. You talked about TikTok and live streaming. Just one question from Max about whether TikTok is also effectively an e-commerce platform, or whether TikTok simply is a marketing channel that you can then sell through other e-commerce platforms. A bit of confusion, a bit of clarity on that.
Yeah, so I would say so TikTok, or Douyin as it's known in China, it's primarily a social media platform. They do have a functionality whereby you can run stores, on the platform, so you can directly link content to stores or product listings. On the whole, that has been used by people who have a large audience to drive to kind of one or two products rather than build a brand. What is more common for brand building on Douyin is linking to an existing e-commerce platform. So for instance, linking to your a Taobao store that's listing your products, or linking directly to a Tmall store. So yes, it is possible to sell products directly on Douyin, but on the whole, it's not used for brand building at the moment. What I would say is everything in China moves very quickly. You know, a platform like Douyin has only been around 3 or 4 years and now has, you know, 500 million users. So they are looking for ways to monetize that, and I expect e-commerce to become a bigger part of that.
Okay, perfect.
Were there any others, Mark?
We'll save the rest till the end, I think, if you want to crack on.
Okay, sounds good. So first of all, tackling that the smaller size brand who really wants to access Chinese demand but has very little budget. Now, in terms of an opportunity, it's really positive for smaller brands at the moment, because although the conversation around Chinese e-commerce is dominated by domestic e-commerce platforms and cross-border e-commerce platforms, there is a growing percentage of consumers that purchase from overseas standalone websites. So in terms of 2019, 21% of consumers had bought from a branded standalone website internationally. If you look at the statistics, it's actually around kind of 16% of consumers, cross-border consumers, have done that in the last month. So that's roughly a market of around $25 billion of Chinese consumers purchasing from .com or .co.uk websites. So there is a huge opportunity for international brands without having to kind of enter China in the way of opening up e-commerce listings there. The reason that Chinese consumers buy from .com websites, there's a number of them, but it's primarily things like product selection. So when a brand enters the China market, they might do so with maybe 5 hero SKUs, and if you want to get like the most current product selection, especially when it comes to like fashion or accessories, those kind of products, then really the brand website is the place to go. Also, price can be an issue when entering the China market. There's usually a distributor and then an e-commerce platform in the value chain, so prices can be higher. But the primary reason, the primary motivation for a Chinese consumer shopping on a .com website is product authenticity. This is a really important thing for Chinese consumers. If they're going to be spending on an international brand, they want to make sure that it is genuinely that a product from that brand. So authenticity is the main driver of .com sales. It's quite a common thing. Hopefully there's some brands on this webinar that are in this situation where in their Google Analytics or whatever website analytics they're using, brands can see that they have Chinese consumers visiting and browsing on their website all the time, but they have either very few or no conversions. This can be due to a number of different reasons, but the kind of 3 primary ones are on this slide. So first of all, site performance, so kind of site speed. Because of the kind of Chinese firewall, quite often a brand's website will run very slowly or sometimes not at all in China, which is obviously a barrier to any purchases being made. Also, accepting Chinese payment methods is a really important thing. Things like Visa, MasterCard, and Amex have very little penetration in the Chinese market. If there is going to be a credit card being used, it will be China Union Pay, but predominantly the online payment methods are those mobile wallets that we discussed earlier, so WeChat Pay or Alipay. So taking those payment methods is an important part of driving purchases. Finally, there's logistics. So not only is logistics from a foreign website going to be slower, that's not really too much of a problem. The expectation of a Chinese consumer is, if they're going to be buying a product from a foreign website, is that it will take up to 12 days to reach them. So it's still quite quick in terms of logistics times if you're not a China specialist, but it's not too much of a barrier to conversion. The thing that is the barrier here when it comes to logistics is an e-commerce law that came into effect in January 2019, which meant that all for cross-border e-commerce, all logistics companies that were going to use that route needed to be granted a license. And as far as I know, the big international companies, so DHL, UPS, those kind of big couriers, no foreign courier has been granted that license by the Chinese government as of yet. So that means that cross-border e-commerce route is completely blocked if people are delivering with a company like DHL. So that means that all parcels, if you are currently delivering to China, it means all parcels are delivered what's called consumer to consumer, or CC. There are lots of rules about limits and product weights for that. And it used to be that around 2% of parcels were stopped, but anecdotally from speaking to China customers now, we know that it's around 30% of parcels that are being stopped from entering China, which is obviously a huge problem for consumers as they don't have that guaranteed delivery. So steps that you can take to improve the conversion for your Chinese web traffic. So first of all, you can optimize your website to ensure it runs quickly in China. So you can deploy your website from a local content delivery network. So somewhere like using servers in somewhere like Japan or South Korea or Hong Kong will increase your website speed. You won't be able to host your website in China because you need what's called an ICP license for doing that, and you need another license if it's going to be a transactional site. But you can, by just moving your website to those local servers, you will increase speed. The other thing is most e-commerce websites in Western markets will have kind of scripts or pixels on them from services which are blocked in China. So for instance, if you have a Facebook pixel on your website, which allows you to track your advertising performance, then you will, or if you have YouTube content embedded on in your website, because those services are blocked, they will slow down and sometimes completely stop your website from being served in China. The other thing that you can do, which is not necessarily China specific, it's just an optimization that you can make, is you can reduce your image file size or video file size to make sure the load time is quicker. The second option or the second thing that you can do, the step you can take is translate your site. Obviously, being fully Chinese language will greatly help the Chinese consumer. I think really the most important part of the process is the checkout process. That's the bit that is kind of more China specific rather than just browsing. And finally, you can integrate with those Chinese payment methods. So the top three really being Alipay, WeChat Pay, and Union Pay. The good thing with all of these kind of technical optimizations are there are loads of service providers within the UK that can do all of this for you. So whether that's someone who'll look at your website or help or integrate with those payment methods, lots of them are CBBC members. So I would contact your contacts at the CBBC to get passed on to those people. But I really want to stress at this point that through this, even if you take these three steps, yes, your website will perform better in China, but you will still not be able to sell through cross-border e-commerce. So that means no lower tax rate and no guaranteed delivery. Samarkand, in terms of the Samarkand solution for this problem, we have a product that will launch in 2020 called Nomad Checkout. Because it's pre-launch, I can't explain too much information on a webinar which is being recorded, but if you want to find out more about this, contact me directly. I'll put my contact details at the end. And this will be a low-cost technology product which makes it possible for you to sell direct to Chinese consumers from your .com or .co.uk website, and it will allow you to take advantage of the lower cross-border e-commerce tax and guaranteed trackable delivery. So if you are maybe if you're a brand of any size, we are currently looking for a few more launch partners for this. So email me directly about that, and I can talk to you about it directly. Something before I move on to the middle-sized brand, a question that does get asked a lot is that if you're a small or niche brand, how will you be discovered by Chinese consumers unless you're kind of marketing the brand in China? There are a whole host of ways, but a lot of it comes down to the number of Chinese people we have in the UK. So there's around 400,000 Chinese visitors to the UK every year. And one of the primary reasons they're coming to the UK is to shop. So their average spend is nearly £1,700. A good chunk of that goes to Harrods. But if you are a store or you are a brand with a physical retail presence, whether that's your own store or concessions in department stores or listings in big retail places, you will have Chinese consumers coming and discovering your brand. And there are steps that you can take to market to those consumers. So, so for instance, integrating with Alipay, one of those methods, the payment methods, that is an application that Chinese consumers can log on to, and they can see all of the retailers that accept Alipay on a map. So if you have a brand store, especially in a high footfall area like London or Edinburgh or Bath or Bicester Village, make sure you're accepting Alipay and you will be discoverable. The second way in which brands are often discovered is the Chinese diaspora, people working or living in the UK. There's over 120,000 Chinese students in the UK. That figure is growing every year. It's predominantly based in London, but those consumers, they are discovering brands all the time, and they will recommend brands on social media to their Chinese friends and family. And crucially, they get visited a lot by their friends and family. So if you can think about Chinese tourists and Chinese students in your normal activity, then you will start to see your brand pick up and be discovered by Chinese consumers. The third option is Daigo. This is a term which basically means entrepreneurial traders who will purchase stock or buy product where they can, and then they will take it into China and sell it to their friends and families and customers. There's a term that's becoming much more common in kind of conversation about China, which is called key opinion consumer. And these are people that might have they have influence over their friends in a particular product category, but more commonly they kind of they might have a Taobao store or a WeChat group where they will sell to their friends. So these guys are taking risks on small brands. So there's not too much you can do to encourage that. But if there is a perception that there will be demand for your brand in China, then these guys will find you.
Sam, sorry to interrupt. It's Mark here. We have about, I think we've got about 10 minutes before the end of the webinar, and it'd be good to have a few minutes just at the end for Q&A. So I don't know, I know you've got a few more slides to go, so I don't know if you want to maybe prioritize certain key messages that you want to get through. And obviously anyone on the call who wants to get a copy of the full slide deck, we can, if you email us, we can make that available. But just for the last sort of 5 minutes, if you want to maybe pick out some key slides that you think are most important.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about overrunning. I will, but yeah, as Mark said, I'll put my contact details up at the end, and people can email me for a copy of the slides. In terms of the middle-sized brands, there is the Chinese e-commerce market. There's lots of different channels. You don't necessarily have to partner with a big e-commerce platform. There are growth opportunities in areas like social commerce, which, as you can see, is growing, and in 2021 will be a similar size to the whole US e-commerce market. So you don't necessarily have to pick one route to market, but it's about identifying the one that's correct for your brand. A problem that we see for medium-sized brands is that they might expand into international markets using the same method in each market, which might be set up a standalone e-commerce website or a .com website and drive traffic to it using Google or Facebook or Instagram ads. Or they might put their products live on Amazon and use Amazon advertising to drive traffic to that. None of those tools are available in China. So this is a graphic from Kantar, which sets out a kind of more detailed view of the digital marketing ecosystem in China. So what that means, because of that complexity, and it's difficult to enter for those medium-sized brands, they can't use the same playbook that they would in somewhere like the US, is that the majority of brands, when they enter China, they look to enter with a third party. So you can either partner with an e-commerce platform directly. People like Alibaba have a big presence in the UK. You can find a Chinese distributor or TP or trade partner. If you've got time and you've got the money to do this, go to China and meet some potential partners. There's also a large number of UK-based service providers, whether that's marketing agencies, distributors, tech providers, available as well, or you can self-operate a store. There are technology solutions that allow you to do that, but realistically, a China team is required. My recommendation is, if you're thinking about entering the China market, do all 4 of these things, talk to all of these partners, and the CBBC will be able to help make recommendations and introduce you to people. The Samarkand solution is to provide all of those different channels through one partnership. So whether that is our listing on some of our multi-brand storefronts, or us running a store for you, or social commerce, we will work with you directly to find the right channel. So for instance, so if you are a stock rich brand but cash poor, social commerce, where you can incentivize the KOL or the leader of that channel with greater margin, is an opportunity. If you're a long-term brand builder, so like a family business or a long-established brand, then B2C storefronts the way you want to go. So for the larger brands, the great thing is that big name brands have always been leading the way in China. And what we're seeing is that younger consumer, brand is becoming less. It is still the biggest driver of consumption, but it's decreasing in its importance. So that means that things like design and style are becoming more and more important for the younger Chinese consumer, which is great news for niche UK brands. And we have this conversation a lot of established brands who might have 2 million or even 4 million pounds worth of sales in the China market after a couple of years, which is a nice problem to have, but they can often suffer from a lack of visibility on sales, so not knowing where they're sold, poor pricing control, inconsistent branding, or a reliance on one SKU. I was speaking to a brand the other day, and 90% of their Chinese sales come through one SKU, which is great for the first few years of your business and getting your brand known, but actually it's not very long-term sustainable way to grow a product or grow a brand, sorry. So things you can do to improve your control over the Chinese market is you can review your relationship with your third party. So when you entered the market, you were an unknown brand, and you had to find a trade partner who would take a risk on you potentially. But now you're an established brand with proof in the market. You could be able to negotiate better terms with your partner, or find a partner that thinks of you slightly differently. You could introduce competing direct-to-consumer stores, either self-operated or through a third party. These sales channels will be under greater control, but there is risk of kind of compounding issues with increased competition. Third thing, big investment, but you could hire a China team, either to manage a third party or to self-operate. I know brands that are doing this within the UK as well as on the ground in China. In terms of Samarkand, the way we approach this giving greater control is through our own technology platform, which controls all of the orders and stock management and gives visibility on sales. Instead of concentrating on this slide, what I'll do is I'll show you some of the analytics platform. So this is just a dummy dashboard, which starts to give the brand an insight into exactly where their sales are happening, and things that starts giving them the pieces of information that brands are used to seeing, such as like new and returning visitors and revenue per customer. There's also social media analytics. So in conclusion, China is the largest and most innovative e-commerce market, but it's unique and it's very, very different, and it changes very quickly. So a lot of people need third parties. It is becoming more accessible for brands of all sizes. That's in part due to outreach of e-commerce platforms, but it's also due with the Chinese consumer becoming a more global consumer, taking more trips abroad and discovering more brands. But there are immediate actions that any brand can take to start to increase their demand with Chinese consumers and increase their discoverability. So whether that's accepting Chinese payment methods in your physical store, or making sure that you accept them online as well, or focusing on Chinese tourists. There are things that you can do immediately. So before we go into the Q&A, here are my contact details. If you want a copy of the slides or some of the detail that I would have gone into if I hadn't run out of time, please feel free to email me, sam@samarkand global, and I will talk to you about any of Samarkand's solutions and have a conversation about China with you.
Okay, great, Sam. And apologies for rushing you slightly at the end. You rifled through those last slides quite quickly, and there was some really good stuff on there. So I think if people do want those slides, then please do email Sam. In fact, Sam, it might be best to leave your contact details up there just while we're talking, just for people to take a screenshot of or make a note of. Just a reminder that for anyone that does have any questions, please do use the question box to send them through. I'm sure that there is a lot there to kind of follow up on. I have a question here from Sarah, who wanted to know, you talked about the sort of towards the end of the presentation about some of the different distribution channels. How does, I mean, do you have any advice specifically about what the mix should be for brands in terms of online versus offline? And secondly, does Samarkand cover both? So do you also work offline, or are you just purely covering the e-commerce side of things?
So Samarkand focuses primarily on the online side of things. When it comes to physical retail, we do have partnerships with some physical distributors. So for example, Probio7, which is a brand we work with, we look after all of their both cross-border and domestic e-commerce, and we work with, on behalf of the brand, we work with a distributor for some of their physical retail. So it's not a key focus of our business, but we certainly, and the way that we approach physical retail is to partner with companies. I think that when it comes to the balance between e-commerce and physical retail, e-commerce, and certainly cross-border e-commerce, is a much quicker route to market. So commonly for brands entering China, they will start with cross-border e-commerce and then they will move on to physical retail, and that is purely because of the product registration process. If your products are already registered, which the length of time it takes is dramatically dependent on the product category. So if you're a supplement, then it can take years and years to register. But then if you are registered, the balance of e-commerce and physical retail is really depends on the product category. But what I would say is e-commerce is where a lot of the innovation is happening in terms of business models, and certainly when it comes to like reaching people in tier 3 to tier 6 cities, a platform like Pinduoduo will be much easier for you to access than physical retail in those markets. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Another question here from, I hope I've got this pronunciation of your name right, Janaya. Janaya has a luxury fashion startup in the swimwear area. It has 7 SKUs and an AOV of £200. Wondering what you've seen, how you've seen the performance of small niche luxury fashion companies. So those kind of startup brands, maybe without huge amount of budget, are there opportunities? What kind of returns do you see for those kind of brands in China?
So I think, so first of all, luxury, the growth in luxury over the last few years has been driven by the Chinese consumer. And so that over the last 15 years has been predominantly big brands. But what we're seeing now is what we're seeing now is a growth in niche brands. So it's a really good time to be a niche luxury brand. And if you are a startup or a small brand, I'm sure that you'll be investing in things like PR and trying to win awards and that sort of stuff. The Chinese consumer is actively out there searching for niche luxury brands. The primary reason, so there's a really good McKinsey luxury report, and Janaya, if you email me, I can pass it on to you. And what that does is it shows that previously the main reason that consumers would buy luxury in China was to differentiate themselves. But now, as luxury has become more ubiquitous in China, it's more difficult to differentiate yourself, and that's driving growth towards niche brands. I think in terms of entering the China market, for a small brand, it's very, very difficult to do through one of the major e-commerce platforms. So I would suggest thinking about how you can sell on your own .com website direct to China would be the right route for a smaller brand.
Okay, perfect. Some really, really great advice there. I'm going to wrap it up with one final question because we are running over time a little bit. But Richard had a question. You mentioned about licenses for couriers that came in January 2019. Wondering, is it better to use a local courier company or companies like DHL and UPS? Any views on like the best shipping route for parcel business?
So when it comes to cross-border e-commerce, it's more complex than just having a license. Than both the merchant, customs, and the logistics provider all need to be integrated with each other. So there's very few people that can offer a true cross-border e-commerce route to market. In terms of just like sending parcels, whether it's kind of consumer to consumer, there are a number of Chinese logistics companies that are working in the UK, and I would recommend using one of them. So I think I was reading a report into Chinese logistics the other day, and the most trusted Chinese logistics firm is SF Express, and they have a London or like a UK-based team. So there are Chinese logistics companies within the UK, and certainly with all of the freight that we send, it's Chinese logistics companies that we're using.
Okay, perfect. We have unfortunately run out of time, but I'd like to, on behalf of everyone, thank Sam for a wonderful presentation. As we said, if you would like to send any further questions to Sam directly, you have his contact details, and I'm sure he'd be happy to circulate the slides. Our next webinar is on the 17th of February, so please do check out the CBBC website and register for that or any other upcoming events that we have.